Welcome to the bell curve, and to 3 hits, 1 miss. By now, Raccoon City should be allowed to rest. It has been bombed, infected, abandoned, investigated, reinvestigated, and emotionally exploited for nearly 30 years. And yet, here we are, returning once again because trauma, like profitable intellectual property, refuses to stay buried. Over the past 3 decades, this franchise has reinvented itself with reckless confidence. Fixed cameras gave way to over-the-shoulder precision, horror yielded to action, and action retreated back into horror. Each transformation upsetting someone, each transformation necessary. With Resident Evil Requiem, Capcom attempts something even more dangerous. It attempts to reconcile everything. This is a game that tries to honour the suffocating dread of Resident Evil 2, the intimacy of Resident Evil 7, and the operatic violence of Resident Evil 4 and Village. It tries to please everyone, which historically is how most things fail. And yet, against the odds, and occasionally against its better judgment, Resident Evil Requiem succeeds. Not perfectly, but convincingly. Hit number 1. Grace Ashcraft and the Return of Fear. Miss Ashcraft is not built for this world. She is not a hardened operative, she is not genetically engineered, she is not Leon Kennedy, she is an FBI analyst, a desk professional, someone whose job normally involves paperwork, not parasites, which makes her perfect. Resident Evil has always been at its best when it strips power away from the player. Grace has very little power to begin with. Her investigation into a string of mysterious deaths leads her to the Rhodes Hill Chronic Care Centre. Courtesy of Victor Gideon, a disfigured, deeply unpleasant man with ties to Umbrella's lingering shadow. What follows is survival horror in its purest form. The care centre is a triumph of design. Locked doors, twisting corridors, darkness that feels deliberate rather than decorative. Every space exists to make you hesitate. Grace moves cautiously because she has no choice. Ammunition is scarce, inventory space is limited, combat is inefficient and dangerous. You do not clear rooms, you avoid them. Stealth becomes instinctive. You crouch, you listen, you wait. And the enemies ensure that waiting is unbearable. These zombies are not simply obstacles, they are remnants. They flick light switches, they mutter to themselves. One continues singing as though trapped in a memory she cannot escape. Another obsessively cleans a bathroom long after civilization has collapsed. They are not merely grotesque, they are tragic. Even worse, they are unpredictable. Some can reanimate, others mutate. A corpse is never just a corpse, it is unfinished business. Grace's vulnerability makes every encounter meaningful. Firing a gun feels consequential, wasteful even. Survival requires planning, restraint, and sometimes cowardice, which is simply courage that knows its limits. Over time, Grace changes. She becomes more capable, more decisive. Not braver necessarily, just more familiar with fear, and that distinction matters. Hit number 2, Leon Kennedy and the Seduction of Power. Leon S. Kennedy does not survive, he dominates. Returning decades after the destruction of Raccoon City, Leon arrives as a man shaped entirely by catastrophe. He is still sharp, still capable, still devastatingly effective. But there is wear beneath the surface, signs of infection, signs of exhaustion, signs that survival has extracted its price. Where Grace embodies vulnerability, Leon embodies control. His gameplay shifts into third person, and the difference is immediate. Weapons are plentiful, combat is fluid, brutal, and satisfying. Leon moves through enemies rather than around them. Shotguns obliterate, sniper rifles dismantle. Melee combat is faster and more expressive than ever, with hatchets, counters, and devastating finishing blows. The combat is superb. Every weapon feels precise and dangerous. Enemies react with convincing physicality. Boss fights are inventive and memorable, forcing you to think even while overwhelming you. Exploring the ruins of Raccoon City is especially effective. Familiar landmarks return, aged and broken. The past is still there, it simply isn't alive anymore. Leon himself feels like a part of those ruins, still standing, still functional, but undeniably altered. Hit number 3, a story that moves the series forward instead of looking back. Resident Evil has never lacked lore, it has occasionally lacked direction. Requiem corrects that. This is the first mainline entry in years to seriously advance the overarching narrative. Umbrella's legacy is not merely referenced, it is examined, expanded, complicated. Victor Gideon is a standout antagonist precisely because he feels rooted in that legacy. He is not a cartoon villain, he is the logical outcome of unchecked ambition. The dual-protagonist structure also serves the story well. Grace provides perspective, she represents those who inherited this broken world. Leon represents consequence, he helped create it. The story balances accessibility with continuity. New players can follow Grace's journey without confusion, while long-time fans will recognise returning elements, locations, and implications. The writing avoids nostalgia for its own sake. Familiar elements are used with purpose. Nothing feels included simply because it existed before. Everything matters. And the miss? The balance eventually tips too far towards action. Resident Evil has always wrestled its own identity. Horror demands vulnerability. Action demands power. Requiem attempts to balance both. For a time, it succeeds beautifully, but eventually the scales tip. Leon's sections begin to dominate the latter half of the game. Combat becomes more frequent, more elaborate, more excessive. The tension that defined Grace's early journey begins to fade. The care centre remains the game's strongest location, because it forces restraint. Later sections, while entertaining, feel less deliberate, less oppressive. Grace's absence is particularly noticeable. Her perspective grounds the experience. Without her, the game becomes more conventional, still excellent but less haunting. It stops asking whether you will survive and starts assuming that you will, which paradoxically makes survival less meaningful. Resident Evil Requiem is a bold, intelligent and deeply confident entry in one of gaming's most enduring franchises. It understands fear, it understands power. Most importantly, it understands the difference between them. It does not balance these elements perfectly. The latter half leans too heavily into action, softening some of the terror that makes the opening hours so exceptional. But even at its weakest, Resident Evil Requiem remains compelling. Because beneath the violence, beneath the horror, beneath the spectacle, it remembers something essential. Survival is not about defeating monsters, it is about becoming someone capable of living in a world where monsters exist.